All right, my friends, today is April the 14th. Let's do our market outlook and plans for the week ahead. Let's go ahead and start off with address the event that we just went through. We had a pretty large sell-off, news-driven event. We talked about this a little bit on the Friday stream when the sell-off began, about how I was kind of viewing things, some of the targets of where I might end up buying some stuff. It turns out it was just a matter of, 12 hours later or 24 hours later rather, and we were hitting those kind of regions where it made sense to ape into things. So if you're interested in gaining access to the spaghetti template and learning how to properly utilize it, you should consider joining the Paragon group. Probably going to be a bit of a longer rundown today through things, but I wanted to start off by just kind of rambling a little bit about the sell-off event. It just is what it is kind of scenario. You got to try your best to be pragmatic and focused on logic-based decisions when these events come through, and not be just making quick, emotional, brash decisions. You're almost always gonna regret having done that after everything kind of passes through and stuff clears up a bit. So it is what it is. I think that it sucks if you lost money on this or got liquidated or anything. The main lesson there is to really be focused on spot plays where you're not going to be susceptible to that. And all the derivative stuff, for the most part, particularly with the perps that I do, is anytime I'm doing leverage perp trades, pretty aggressive to take profit on those things most of the time, unless it's very, very early in the trend. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the comparison to the COVID crash. To be clear, I did not spend a lot of time on Twitter this weekend. I think that stuff's generally not going to be good for you, and everybody's freaking out. It's just going to heighten your own emotions most likely. So if you feel susceptible to that, then you do want to try your best to stay off social media as much as possible, and I would probably just recommend to chill in the Discord most of the time with the more reasonable people. So the comparison, I just quick TLDR on that, is the comparison to the March crash in 2020 that is ridiculous. Even this this nuke that we just had, even the May crash from 2021 was more substantial. But this crash, I know it looks like like it wasn't a big deal when you're looking at it with all this price action that's played out, but this was a true black swan event, the kind of event that you probably only see a couple times in your entire lifespan. So I've never witnessed or experienced anything else that will ever compare to March 2020. We saw oil go negative, which is just a wild point, but just the way that Bitcoin sold off to where there was just absolutely no buyers, it's really just something that you're not going to experience very often. Maybe it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing that you even see in your life. So people comparing the sell-off that we had this weekend to kind of the previous large sell-offs is just kind of ridiculous. Look at this chart, what just happened. All it did was just a bullish retest of macro support. I know that altcoins got obliterated, and we'll obviously be spending time on those once we get to the altcoin section, but it really just, I know it feels bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as it feels, right? It's really emotions that are making you feel that way, and that's kind of heightened by other people rambling on social media and putting out threads and stuff. So that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and let's get focused up, get serious. Let's get into the Bitcoin talk. Main thing to start off with is going to be from a macro standpoint. I know that was a rough sell-off, but market structure is still bullish, right? The main thing was, maintaining over 60K, which we bounced from. I'm not saying that we're just going to turn around and, immediately sail off into the sunset with, higher prices. I do think that we're probably going to continue to chop people up, which more or less my, macro thesis of having a choppy summer is continuing to play out. I'm not going to LARP and say I expected that we would do a rapid range low retest like that. That was pretty wild, but I think that we're just still in the middle of that boring summertime kind of stage. So from here on out, I think that we're just going to keep chopping people up. And as we get towards the end of Q2, probably going to resume the uptrend. So it really is simple for me from a Bitcoin standpoint. If you lose 60K, then we're in deep shit, and that we're probably going to trade a lot lower. The only other thing that would really invalidate my bullishness is if I saw some clear signs of distribution in the spot flows. But I haven't seen that yet. And I mean, it is really easy to mistake spot selling for distribution. So the kind of spot selling that I saw at the end of 2021, I haven't seen anything remotely similar to that. So until I see like just absolute everyday spot TWAPs just firing off selling on the major venues, something like that, I'm not going to be bearish from a flow standpoint. So the technical argument is 60K. As long as we're over 60K, we're bullish. And yeah, I mean, I think that we're probably just going to keep chopping people up. People probably think that they were able to snipe entries yesterday, particularly the leverage buyers, right? If people that bought spot on Saturday, they're probably going to be fine, and those probably were actually really good spot buys in my opinion. However, the people that just bought, that thought that it was the all clear to ape in with high leverage, those people are going to get chopped up. And yeah, I mean, so really heavy emphasis on the spot plays for sure. So that's pretty much it for the macro, right? I'm still bullish. You know my levels that I'm working with. Nothing's changed on that. So yeah, that's pretty much that. I think that Q2 is going to be painful for people because it's going to be sideways and probably will almost certainly, in my opinion, see volatility compress now and diminish. So we're just going to probably enter into a lower volatility regime after that nuke and chop people up. I think that once we get into Q3 though, the trend is probably going to start to resume and get really strong. And then by the time we get to Q4, that's probably where it starts to exhaust, in my opinion, and has its kind of, I don't think that we'll have a blow off top, but that's Q4 of this year is what I'm kind of thinking is we're going to be where we have our peak point for the run, either Q4 or potentially Q1 of 2025. I think I've already expressed that several times on a lot of the streams, but that's definitely the overall vibe. So that's enough for the macro talk. Nothing's really changed. I know that was a big event that we just went through, but I don't think that it changed anything for me on Bitcoin. A lot of altcoins though, it's going to be a different story. So once we get to altcoins, we'll cover that. So kind of what I'm working with on the medium time frame is that this looks like a pretty decent low that we have set in. So how I'm looking at it is that we're probably going to trade up and kind of interact with the midpoint of the range here pretty soon. How that kind of plays out most likely is that I kind of expected that we would have a little bit of a sell-off on Monday. So pretty undecided. We're an hour and a half into the weekly open so far. Pretty undecided because we're just chopping it up right now. But basically this is, if you look at this on lower time frame, this is a pretty strong demand block right here, overlapping with a macro composite. So if we were to kind of pull back towards 64K, that would make a lot of sense for me as the kind of spring point to trade up higher into the week towards the midpoint. So basically right now, as long as there's no major, I think that the selling from headlines will probably have diminished to this point where I don't know if the headlines are really going to have that much sell pressure on us. I guess that's going to be largely contingent upon what equities do, right? If there's a news headline that comes out and equities puke, then that's probably going to fuck us up, if we're being honest. But just from focusing on a vacuum kind of mindset from just the technicals, this is what it looks like will happen to me, is that we'll probably pull back and then kind of retest this midpoint and chop it up around the midpoint somewhat. This was supposed to be drawn a little bit lower, but it is what it is. I messed up my drawing, but chopping it up around the midpoint probably makes sense. If we can kind of accept above the midpoint, then we could probably go ahead and try to retest the range high. I think that this is a really reasonable way for it to play out, for us to trade down, mess around in the midpoint, and then get through and trade towards the range high. The thing is that it's probably going to take a bit of time for this to play out. But this is the most likely scenario. The other scenario I'm working with is us not finding support here and us kind of sweeping the low. If this was to happen, this would be time to be super focused up for me. Because if we don't get a strong bounce, if we trade down here and don't get a strong bounce and get a weak bounce, then I would probably be shifting to more of a risk-off mindset. What that would look like for me would be potentially selling off some of my bags, my spot bags, and no doubt looking for a hedge. So I would for sure look for a hedge trade and potentially be trying to just size down my long exposure if that was the case. But I don't think that that's something that we need to worry about just yet, because I think us drifting up higher, just bullish chop, basically, much more leaning towards the chop element in that statement, right? I think that we're really going to chop people the fuck up and probably be relatively low volatility. That's pretty much it. So Solana still looks really good to me. I'm hoping that continues to be the case, because I did, it's my second largest bag. I did go ahead and add to it on Saturday too. So I own a lot of Solana, so I'm really hoping that this is going to be the case. The overall trend structure has been really healthy. The yearly open has been very solid as well. So I'm pretty happy with this coin. I don't really have any complaints. I want to see 150 hold. If 150 doesn't hold, then I want to see the yearly VWAP hold. Ideally, it doesn't, we don't see too much of a pullback in the market, and that this just like it's like 145 or whatever, like this magic green line. I want to see that hold. Us pulling back towards the yearly VWAP isn't going to be the end of the world. It would just be kind of retesting my previous buys, but it is what it is. So overall, I really like Solana still. I think that it's going to be a big performer. I think Solana is like one of the best of the safe plays. So it's not like Solana is going to go up 10x from here, but I think it's just going to, throughout the rest, like throughout Q3 in particular, I think that something like Solana will just be a slow grinder upwards. Next, Doge. I have a pretty ridiculously big bag of Doge now. My average is, I'm above water on my average for sure right now. Totally could see a retest of my average entry at some point and have us trading down towards 14 cents again or whatever. That's not really going to be too much of a worrying sign for me. Because these are all really long term right here, right? I think that if that's the case, I don't really want to see, I'm not too worried about us like retesting this kind of region, but if we were to kind of be trading below 12 cents, I would be very worried if that was the case. So if we do trade down lower, I want to see this like 13, 14 cent area hold as support. Otherwise, I would be pretty worried, and how I would probably be protecting myself would not be in the form of just selling off my spot. I would just be looking to open up a hedge. That's obvious. That's the obvious way to play it from a protection standpoint. Just like puking your spot into a region like this is probably going to blow up in your face. So that's how I'm viewing that. But I think that Doge is a phenomenal play over the next like 2 quarters. So I'm hoping that works out well and that it doesn't blow up on me. Hopefully everybody just made it through this pain period. I know it sucked for everybody, myself included. But look at things long term. Yeah, be optimistic about stuff and click buttons. Cheers, everybody.